Okay, welcome to How to Buy a Home in a Hot Seller's Market.
These are proven ninja strategies to win in a multiple offer competition. Today, we are here with David Ashburn, a home loan consultant with Bay Equity Loans. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Mike and Pete.
Yep, you bet. And Pete Sabine, real estate consultant with Pacific Union Real Estate. Pete.
Hi there, glad to be here today.
Thank you. My name is Michael Moore. I'm Pete's business partner over at Pacific Union. And hold on, we're going to start the show. This is part 2 of our How to Buy a Home in a Hot Seller's Market. Today you're going to learn what we covered in part 1 was how to hire the right lender, how to prepare for financing, how to buy before you sell, how to hire the right realtor, what to look for when buying a condo, and what terms to include in your offer. And what we'll cover today includes what you must do before submitting your offer, how to win in a multiple offer competition, how to best form the price, or how to form the best price strategy, how to draft your offer cover letter, and what to do if your offer is not accepted. Pete, is it true that you can have inspections prior to submitting your offer?
Yes, it is true. Here's what most people do. Most people submit an offer, and if their offer is accepted, then they schedule their inspections based on the time frame allotted in the contract contingency for inspections. So that's one way of doing it. A better way of doing it is to schedule inspections prior to submitting your offer. Get them on the calendar. And in your cover letter to the listing agent and to the seller, you can identify that you've taken steps to minimize the time needed to get through the inspection contingency. Another way of doing it, which is even better, is to actually have an inspection done before your offer is accepted. If you feel strongly that this house is the right one for you, while you're waiting for the offer to be reviewed, you can hire an inspector to do a visual inspection and give you a verbal report at the property. And when your offer is accepted, then you can go back to that same inspector and have that inspection converted into a written report. That would enable you to be more competitive because you then can go in with an offer and show the listing agent representing the seller and the seller that you've taken those proactive steps to move forward as quickly as possible to get through the transaction in the contingency period.
Thanks, that's good information. So if you haven't done that and you've been making offers, you might want to consider getting that done. So how do you decide what price to offer when there are 3, 6, 8, 10, 20 offers on homes in certain markets?
Well, this is a market where it's a pick a number and pray environment. It's really a sealed bid auction, unfortunately, for the buyer, because you don't know, there is no transparency about what the other competing buyers are willing to pay for the property. The listing price in this environment is basically a starting point. It's the benchmark from where you start. If you're unwilling to pay the list price or more, and you're competing with other buyers in this environment, this probably is not the market for you. So let's assume for a moment that you're willing to be competitive on price. So there are some clues in the marketplace that you can look to help you determine where to come in with a price that would be competitive. And one way you can get there is to have your realtor go on to the multiple listing and do a survey of recent nearby sales in the last 60 days of similar homes, same neighborhood, same school district, same size, same condition, and take a look at the original asking price and then look at the price where the property is actually sold and come up with an average. So as an example, if they're selling at 5% on average over the asking price, and these are all recent transactions of like-kind similar properties, then it's pretty obvious that your price that you come in with should be at least 5%. And if you really want to ensure you're going to win on price, don't settle for average. Come in with an above average price. Come in at 7, 8, or even 10% above the price because of the average price. Because in a market that's rising like this, that's typically what's happening, is the list to sales price ratio is actually increasing as the market gains strength. There's another strategy out there that is something that is a little controversial. It's not for everybody. However, we have used it successfully, not only in this hot sellers market, but in the same hot sellers market we had 10 years ago. And this strategy, called a sharp bid or relative offer, was really born out of the Silicon Valley market, which makes the Contra Costa East Bay Area market look timid in comparison. And what this is a strategy where you come in with a price. Let's say the asking price is $700,000, and you come in with your offer price of $725,000. And then you attach this addendum to your contract that says that the buyer agrees to pay $5,000 above the highest competing bona fide written purchase offer up to a maximum price of $750,000. So what you've just done is you've made your price move with the competition. So your anchor price is the $725,000, your maximum cap price is $750,000. And if there's a competing offer at $726,000, then it triggers this escalator clause, and now you're paying $5,000 above the $726,000. You're actually paying $731,000. So it's also a way to minimize your exposure for just coming in at $750,000 when you didn't need to. When the highest competing offer was $726,000, all it takes is a few bucks more to get it. So there's some distinct advantages in it for you as the buyer, and obviously for the seller. It shows the seller that you're willing to compete on price right out of the gate. They understand that. The other thing is, how do you prove that there was a competing offer? What if, you're relying upon the seller to be honest with you that there was a trigger that took you to $731,000. So you add item number 2. Seller shall deliver to buyer a copy of the first page of the purchase agreement, which has all the numbers on it. And that will spell out the highest competing offer. So that would confirm the validity of your $731,000 $5,000 sharp bid above $726,000, which would be stated on the page 1 of that competing offer.
So it's real easy to see when your agent is showing you those comparable MLS sheets, the printouts. At the bottom of the page, it's going to say what the list price was, what the sales price was, and the percentage over of what it was, 105%, 107%, and how many days on the MLS. And that's going to give you a good idea as to where your offer should come in at.
Right.
Some buyers' agents will ask the seller for pre-sale inspections, Pete, and disclosures, but that's not entirely good enough just to ask for those. What else should they do? What additional steps?
Well, the first thing I would think about is if the seller and the realtor have taken the time to do pre-sale property inspections and fill out all the required disclosures, then you should honor that and take the time to read all of those and then deliver signed copies that proves to the seller and their agent that you have taken the time to read that information they've provided, that you understand the condition of the property, and essentially you're moving forward with a purchase offer, and it's presumed that your offer and the price that you're willing to pay is baking into the cake, if you will, your knowledge of the as-is condition of the property. And by the way, most sales in a competition are being sold as is, and this defines what as is means.
So the highest price is not always the determining factor in having your offer selected. Last week in part 1 we discussed terms. Can you expand on that a bit, Pete?
Yeah, one of the things in part 1 that we explored is before you come forward with an offer, find out what's important to the seller. Find out what their needs are. Find out what unique circumstances exist that they want to see in a purchase offer. And in that regard, if you have a seller-occupied property, in most cases, if the seller has to find another home to buy after they sell the one that they're selling, they're going to need time to get there. And a rent back option that allows them to stay past the closing date is one of the best ways to provide that flexibility to help the seller avoid a costly and expensive double move into interim housing. You can even take that the next step further. In a traditional market where it's balanced, typically the seller compensates the buyer during the rent back term to cover the buyer's per diem housing expense, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, HOA dues, whatever it is. So to sweeten the pot, you can offer them free rent during the term of their occupancy. You can also add another layer of flexibility by giving them the option to extend that 30-day initial term if they need it. If they get to the end of that 30-day term and they're not quite there yet, to help them avoid a double move, you could put that extension clause in there. So that's one way where when you come in with an offer and the seller sees that you've taken the time and the interest in what's important to them, they see the value in that, and they see you as being somebody interested in someone other than yourself and what's important in the transaction.
So Dave, giving the seller a 3 months rent, it's not that big of a deal because the buyer's first payment is 2 months out typically? You skip the next month?
Correct. When you close escrow in any given month, you'll pay, the buyer's going to pay the interest from the day they close through the end of the month. The following month, they'll have no payment whatsoever, and in the subsequent month, the payment will come, and they're paying for the interest due for the prior month. So mortgages are odd in that respect that you're always paying in arrears. So yeah, you're going to have a 30-day grace period for your first payment anyway.
Perfect.
So in other words, you're not really going to even feel that in your cash flow. It is dollars that you're spending in some sense, but if it makes the difference in getting your offer accepted, this is one of the simplest ways to make that offer more attractive. And it also shows the seller that they didn't have to come back with a counter offer to ask for it. What you want to try to avoid is having the seller have to come back and re-engineer your offer. While they're doing that, another offer can slip in and you're looking on the outside in.
So how is it best to approach the deposit, the good faith deposit?
Well, traditionally, the good faith deposit should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So if your offer price is $700,000, your initial good faith deposit should be at least $7,000. Increasing your deposit to 3% of the purchase price would be a good thing to do, because the bigger your deposit, the more skin you have in the game, so to speak, and the less likely it is for you as the buyer to walk away from $21,000 versus $7,000 in the event you change your mind for any reason. Just know that your deposit is typically refundable up until the point at which you've removed your last contingency. And after you've removed all your contingencies, most, if not all, the purchase agreements have a liquidated damages provision that protects your deposit exposure to that 3% and no more than that if you should fail to close the escrow. So a large deposit helps. It helps show the seller that you're serious. It helps reduce the probability that you're going to leave that money in escrow and go buy another house that you like better that came along during the middle of the transaction.
Pete, what are the typical contingencies a buyer can expect in the purchase agreement?
Well, if you're obtaining a loan, there is a loan approval contingency, which allows you to go through the underwriting process. The appraisal contingency, which confirms the purchase price and the purchase agreement through an independent appraisal. Typically, it's ordered through your lender if there is a lender. If not, you can order an appraisal through an independent resource. There's also the provision where you must provide a loan pre-approval letter within 3 days of the purchase agreement. That's the default period, as well as verification of your down payment and funds to close escrow. So if you want to make your offer more attractive, one of the strategies you can use is to either eliminate contingencies entirely, and if you can't or you're unwilling to eliminate contingencies, then reduce the time frame for those contingency periods. So the sooner that you get through the transaction to a point where the seller and the seller's realtor knows that you are moving forward contingent free, the faster you can get there, whether it's from the outset because you have no contingencies in your offer, or they're very short fuses on the time frame, it's going to make your offer more competitive. And this is a question for David. So if I've taken the step to meet with David before I go out into the marketplace to buy a home, and he's taken all my information and I've provided all the supporting documentation, and that's all been verified, what is the need to have a loan contingency in the purchase agreement if getting a loan is almost a sure bet? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, well, that really depends on the capability of the person that you're talking to, the lender. But assuming that the person is aware of underwriting guidelines and they're an experienced lender, if you've provided all these documentation that we're talking about here, your income documentation, your asset documentation to support your down payment, and credit's been run, and your lender's got his eyes open, they should have the ability to tell you the likelihood of any potential issues. So the honest truth here is that no lender gives a hard written approval. That just never actually happens anyway. There's discussions that happen in between the loan agent, the processor, and the underwriter, and there's an internal document that tells you that your loan's approved. But the reality of it is there really isn't any formal loan approval other than your loan documents that mean anything. So as long as you've done a good job of pre-approving, then you can remove your loan contingency at any time that you want to.
Or not even have one at all. And that's a strategy that we find is working for us extremely well. If we have a fully vetted out buyer and the lender's comfortable with their ability to obtain financing, then there really is no reason to have a loan approval contingency in the contract. The other is the appraisal contingency. So this is an issue where if you have an appraisal contingency, what it says is that in the event that the appraisal reveals the appraised value to be lower than the purchase price in the contract, the buyer reserves a unilateral right to cancel. That doesn't mean the buyer has to cancel. It just means that you can. It also means that if you don't want to cancel, you can proceed with the sale and make up the difference in cash. And when you make up the difference in cash, then you're making it up typically in the ratio of the loan to value. So in other words, if you're getting an 80% loan, and if we play this out for a minute, if the purchase price is $700,000 and you're going for 80% of $700,000 as a loan amount, and the appraisal comes back at $690, you're still going to get a loan. You're going to get an 80% of $690 instead of 80% of $700. Which means you have to come up with 80% of the difference, the $10,000, to close the gap. That's $8,000. So if you want to make your offer really competitive, eliminate the appraisal contingency if you have the will and the ability to make up the difference. Because sellers typically are setting new high watermarks with real estate values, and it may not appraise. And the listing agent knows that, and the seller probably understands that as well. And what they want to know is, do we have a buyer that's willing to proceed with this transaction regardless of where the appraisal value comes in? And if you're one of those buyers, that will definitely assist you. No loan contingency, no appraisal contingency, competitive on the price, not necessarily the highest price, and flexibility in the closing and the occupancy. You will be one of the top contenders in the competition because of that.
So let's talk about the inspection contingency. What would be the pros and cons associated with removing the inspection contingency or compressing it up front?
Inspection contingencies are your safety valve. I call it the kitchen sink clause. It's really more than an inspection of the premises. The purchase agreement has what's called an investigation of property contingency, which is essentially the kitchen sink clause. That allows you to not only do on-site property inspections, mechanical, structural, appliances, whatever, but it allows you to investigate things about the property, where it is, what it's affected by, airplane traffic patterns, school districts, all of those things play into your kitchen sink clause. Typically, we see properties come on the MLS and there's an offer date set, and it's typically a week to 2 weeks from the MLS date. That gives the buyer the time to go out and investigate everything around and about the property before you make your offer to make sure it's the right house for you.
Is there a garage band next door that plays on Saturday and Sunday night?
So come by on Saturday night at 3 in the morning, hang out and see how good they are. No, I'm kidding. And sometimes on karaoke night they might let you join in. But those are the things that you can vet out before you bring your offer in. As far as the actual inspections themselves, this gets back to doing a pre-sale inspection on your own if the seller is not providing you with their own pre-sale inspections prior to the offer date. If you're getting pre-sale inspections from the seller and or you've done your own pre-sale inspections, that enables you to responsibly waive your inspection contingency when you deliver your offer. In other words, that's one less significant contingency and one huge level of uncertainty that's removed from the probability of you not moving forward with the transaction. And it takes, it's not for the faint of heart. You need to do this well and not just capriciously. Most buyers in this marketplace in our area aren't doing this. This is a tactic that's being used all the time in other stronger markets such as Montclair, Oakland, Berkeley, that part of the East Bay, San Francisco, the South Bay, and areas where the market's hotter. So a lot of the strategies that we're sharing with you here are relatively unused in this marketplace, and when you use them, you're automatically ahead of the curve.
So the contingency removal form here, can you speak to how that affects, when to use it and how that affects the purchase?
If you're going to come in contingent free, then you're going to attach the contingency removal to your purchase offer, and you're going to check off the contingencies that you intend to waive upon acceptance of the offer. You can waive all of them, or you can select the loan, the appraisal, the inspection, or whatever's on that menu. But when you attach that contingency removal and you've left no contingencies to satisfy, then your deposit, when it goes into escrow, presumably is non-refundable. And if you fail to perform, in most cases, the seller has a claim to keep your deposit for a breach of contract. So there is the caveat. You have to be certain that you intend to close escrow for the risk that you put your deposit money in place.
Pete, what other terms can a buyer offer, and where in the offer should they be included?
Well, I can't think of one seller, no matter what the market is like, that doesn't want to sell their property as is. I mean, who would? Here's the sign, it's for sale, here's the price, come get it.
Come get it.
We're leaving, and tell us how it goes, here's the keys. That's how most sellers would prefer to sell, and who wouldn't? In a hot seller's market, if you're unwilling to buy the property as is, you may not be competitive at all. And to demonstrate your willingness to take the property as is, there are things that you can do to embellish the contract to make sure that the seller and the seller's agent understands that. What you should know about the standard pre-printed agreement that most of us use in California is that all purchase contracts without an amendment are as-is contracts, unless you add something to it that requires the seller to make a repair. So knowing that, you're going in as is. But there's also the inspection contingency if you have one. So if you're going to have an inspection contingency, one way to communicate to the seller is through an addendum. You add this verbiage. The seller has read and received all inspection reports and property disclosures provided by the seller prior to acceptance, if they did, and agrees to purchase the property as is. Number two, any inspections obtained by the buyer are for information purposes only and without any seller repair concessions. Why is that important? Some buyers have a strategy of getting their offer accepted, paying over the asking price, and then coming back with a laundry list of repairs or credit concessions to get some of their money back that they overpaid above the listing price. Listing agents are aware of that tactic. They're concerned that if they take an offer and they pick the wrong buyer who has that goal in mind, that they could end up renegotiating the transaction 2 weeks later, or worse, it falls apart because the buyer and seller come to an impasse over those concessions.
So what other terms can we include in our purchase?
It's simple. Pay for everything.
You're gonna anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk about normal and customary, and then we'll put it into proper context. So in a balanced market, what's normal and customary can vary from one region to the next. In Southern California, as an example, typically the buyer and seller split the cost of the escrow fee, the title insurance, and things of that nature. In Contra Costa County in the East Bay Area, it's customary that the seller pays the county transfer tax. The seller pays for HOA documents and transfer fees within an HOA. And the buyer would pay for their title insurance and their escrow fees. The seller pays for a home warranty, those things. That all represents a normal transaction. That's customarily how we arrange who pays for what. In an abnormal market like we're in, there's no rule that says that the seller has to pay for any of those things. So if you want to sweeten the pot without raising your price, one way of allowing the seller to net a higher net return is to pick up all these incidental fees, including the transfer tax, if there is one, HOA fees, pay for your home warranty, and those types of things.
Well, in some cases, some of these items might be incidental anyway. They might not even be very much. So it just strengthens your offer without it really costing you too much anyway, isn't that
right?
The case?
Yeah, so the county transfer tax, in case you're wondering how much that could be, it's $1.10 per thousand of the purchase price. So if the price is $700,000, it's $770 that you're paying instead of the seller's paying. The homeowner's transfer fee is typically $400 to $600. The home warranty can be anywhere from $350 to $600. So relative to the purchase price and the value of the real estate, these costs are relatively insignificant, but it's impressive when a seller sees that you're willing to pick up all these little add-on fees that reduce their net proceeds.
Real goodwill gesture. Dave, how's recent banking reform? Oh, this is out of order. We always write cover letters with our purchase agreement to submit to the listing agent. Pete, as a listing agent, what do you like to see in the cover letter from both the buyer and from the realtor presenting the offer?
So we represent sellers a lot in multiple offer competitions. I mean, one of the challenges that we have as listing agents and sellers have is that we get a flurry of purchase offers, 5, 10 offers at a time, and sifting through each one of those documents and every page and every clause is extremely time consuming. One of the ways to help the seller and the seller's agent cut to the chase, if you will, is to put together a really clear and concise cover letter, one page, bullet point, easy to read, that extrapolates the key features and the benefits of your offer so that they get it right out of the gate. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be sifting through all these contracts. They're going to get tired. They might forget some of the key salient points that are buried 16 pages deep into your offer, and the other 8 offers are trying to sift through. So the cover letter from the real estate agent needs to be all business, clear, concise, professional, highlight the key sales terms. You might even take a highlighter to those terms in the contract so they're highlighted in yellow, so as they're scanning through the pages they can correlate that. You want to put the name and the contact information of the home loan consultant in the cover letter. You want to assure the listing agent that if they have questions and they're trying to figure out who's the best qualified and they need more information for any reason, you want to have a direct connection to the loan officer. And then adding the realtor's track record and years of experience as a closing statement in that cover letter is important, because the listing agent is trying to figure out not just who the best buyer, the best offer is for their client, but who is guiding and counseling and navigating through that transaction representing the buyer. Are they capable? And what do they like to work with? And have they sold houses in this area before? What do they know about our market?
Famous or infamous?
Yeah, right. Or notorious.
Notorious.
And then the letter from the buyer, from you, that should be different. That doesn't have to be all business. Let your realtor and your lender draft cover letters that are all about the numbers and all about the business side of it. From you, we recommend that you include a letter that's warm, personal, and friendly in its tone. Include personal information about you and your property or your family. Add some dimension to this one-dimensional process that we're now involved with selling homes. It used to be in the good old days, we would meet with the buyer's agent and the seller's agent at the seller's home or in the listing agent's office, and the people were all at the table, and in many cases the buyer was in the lobby of the office or in the car of the realtor waiting for a response. And these people have met each other. They're talking to one another. It's three-dimensional. That's gone out the window, unfortunately, and we rarely do offer presentations that way anymore. And it's unfortunate because it's a people business. You're buying somebody's home, all their memories, the stewardship of that property. The sellers care about that. They care about their neighbors. And you want to create the image of making their home your home as the sellers did through that communication. So if you can't meet with them and make it warm and fuzzy, the next step is your cover letter.
So they're still in the same room, but they're texting each other.
Right. It's a digital room. That's right.
So it's important for our listeners to understand that we work together as a team to get their offer accepted. Dave, what do you always call the listing agent on the buyer's behalf to explain the program and their loan product and wherewithal?
Well, yeah, I mean, the buyer can't assume that this is going to happen, so I suggest that if you are a buyer and you're working with a lender, that you discuss this specifically with them so that they do this. I find that this is extremely effective in helping you get an advantage with your offer being accepted, because typically the selling agent doesn't know you. They may, in fact, know the loan agent, and that's very helpful too. But if a telephone call goes out rather than a text or just an email, you translate a lot more information verbally. And so if your agent is willing to call that listing agent and discuss with them that you are a very strong buyer, they've discussed this, all the transaction details with you already, and that they have all your documentation that's been reviewed and approved by the underwriter, it makes the selling agent feel much more comfortable in accepting your offer over the others, especially if in cases where it may not even be the highest offer, but it looks like the best offer by using all these other strategies that Pete and Mike are talking about here.
So one of the frustrations that listing agents endure sometimes is the fact that they're on the seller side of the table and they don't have access to the buyer side and the team it takes to get the transaction done. And by having the home loan consultant reach out without asking prior to the offer being presented and offer the accessibility and the expertise, that listing agent walks away from that phone call knowing that this is a team effort. It's not an us versus them. We're going to work together as a team to get this sale closed and make the experience as smooth as possible for both the buyer and the seller.
So now that the offer's been submitted, now what?
It's showtime. And here we go. So your number one goal is to stay in the game. And what is the game? The game is you and 8 other people are trying to buy one house from one seller. And so if your offer isn't accepted outright, as it's written, when it's presented, the next best thing is to get a counter proposal from the seller, even if it's a multiple offer counter proposal, which we'll talk about in a second. So when multiple offers come in, the listing agent is trying to decide, is there an offer in the stack that's worth accepting today as it's written, and be done with this? Did it meet the seller's goal? Hopefully you've written an offer that would compel them to do that, but if you didn't, then the next step would be, out of the 8 offers, which offers rise to the top? If there's more than one and there's some differences between the 2 offers, that can be reconciled through a counter proposal, listing agents will use a multiple counter offer, which enables the seller to enter into negotiations without any obligations to sell to any specific party simultaneously. So if we play this out, if 8 offers are delivered and received and reviewed, the seller and the seller's agent pick the top 3. They send out multiple counter offers to each party. The multiple counter offer has a provision that says that unless the seller signs that counter offer one more time after it's been accepted by the buyer, it's not ratified until that happens. So that prevents the seller from selling one house to 3 buyers. But what it also does is it enables you to stay in the game. And this is where things get interesting. It's also where things tend to become more transparent. Remember, we talked about a sealed bid environment, an auction environment where you have no transparency, you have no clues about what the other offers are. When you get a multiple counter offer on the receiving end, you're going to probably see a price. And that price is set by another competing buyer. And that price is now the benchmark. That's the number to hit. The other terms could be things like time frames for contingencies, rent back options, all of these things that are infused into that counter offer to balance it out with the other 2 offers. So when you get the counter offer, you're beginning to see clues about what it takes to be in the top echelon of the offers and be competitive. Here's where most buyers get this wrong. You can sign that counter proposal as it's written and cross your fingers and hope that the seller picks you. Now what if all 3 buyers sign that multiple counter offer without any changes to up the ante? All they've really done is they've put the seller in a position to pick one of those 3 offers, and now they've all been trued up, they're all reconciled, they're all the same. So then it gets into a personality contest, quote unquote. So look at, if you get a counter offer, it's an invitation to raise the ante. Don't just settle for acceptance. If you have the will and the ability, this is your second chance. This is a reprieve to come back and really knock it out of the park and show the seller that you're committed, you want that house. You can either raise the price, you can offer free rent, you can remove contingencies, whatever it is, a combination of any of those things to take it to the next level. Most of your competing buyers will not do that. They're just going to say, oh, thanks for the counteroffer, yes, we'll sign it, and cross their fingers and not raise the ante. And this is where you can tip the favor of having your offer accepted into your hand.
The seller's going to have to sign one more time regardless.
That's right.
So make him sign the better one.
Make it easy.
So we just kind of spoke to that, how should they respond to a multiple counteroffer, raise the price, accelerate the terms, and offer a rent back.
The 4th one that's not on here is send the listing agent to Hawaii one way.
One way.
Now, round trip's okay.
And after all of that effort, what if your offer is not accepted?
Well, looks like you just became the bridesmaid instead of the bride.
So you caught a bouquet.
You did. But here's what you should think about.
The best man.
There you go. What we're seeing in this market is multiple offer competition, a buyer that has been out there for quite a while. They've probably made 4 or 5 offers before they finally figure out how to make a strong offer and get it accepted. What they've also done is they begin to overcompromise on the homes that they're interested in. And it comes from the need to get a home, the need to get your kids in school before school starts, the need to finish the transfer and relocation, all of those things. And pretty soon your wish list becomes a lot smaller. What we're seeing is a fallout rate. So the buyer wins the battle, loses the war, so to speak. They beat out the competition, their offer's accepted, and now they're in escrow and the dust begins to settle and they realize that they really need a 4-bedroom home instead of a 3-bedroom, and they just can't bring themselves to complete the sale. There are a lot of reasons why we're seeing sales fall apart, and it's more common than you know, and it's not being publicized very well, if at all. So one of our strategies is to recommend to our client, to our buyer, if we didn't get the offer accepted, and if the seller is not offering a backup position to us, then we go and we ask for it. And the reason for that is that if you're in a backup position as a buyer, you have a lot of things working for you. A, you can continue to look for another house to buy. And when you find another house that you want to buy, you go back to the seller who has your backup offer, and with a phone call and a memo, you can cancel your backup offer position with no obligation. You're typically not obligated to put your deposit in escrow, to have any money or time spent on inspections or loan appraisals while you're waiting. So you have the first right of refusal to buy the property if the primary offer fails. And why is that valuable? Because when you're in a backup offer position, you've already negotiated the terms of your contract. The negotiations are done. If you have the opportunity to slip in as a primary buyer, they're accepting your offer as it was accepted weeks ago or even months ago. Also, you're locking out all the other buyers. The property doesn't go back on the market. It goes to you. So you're not competing for it all over again. And your time frame for performance begins when you become the primary buyer. So you've got everything working to your advantage, and you have little or no risk at all. In fact, you could have more than one backup offer on more than one property while you're trying to find the right house to buy.
Also, you may find yourself the beneficiary of the first buyer's reports and disclosures and investigations.
That's right. Sometimes the sales will fall apart over that. Repair concessions, things that were discovered during escrow that weren't known to either party. Who knows? But you could be walking into a sale that's far enough along where there's not much left to do but complete the financing and close the escrow if you need the financing. And you could save time and money that way. Also, the seller in most cases, they've already been through the process. They might be a little more motivated now to make those concessions. Who knows? But it's typically all good news when you get the call that you now have the opportunity to slide into a primary position.
So, if you would like to learn more, hire us and our expertise. We've won several high visibility multiple offer situations in the last few months. David, how can they contact you?
Well, the best way to get me is by going to www.ashburn.com, but here on this slide you can see my telephone number, which is the 980-3305.
You got ashburn.com?
Yes, I do.
Holy cow. Pete, how do they get a hold of you?
297-5335, area code 925. You can text or call me. I'm open 24/7, 7 days. No, I'm not. I will return your call promptly, however. We're going to open this up for live Q&A. If there's any questions out there that we can help you with, that would be great. We're also going to send to you a recording of what you just learned today. There's a handout that you can download, and we can send that to you as a PDF attachment as well. So with that, if you have a question, please type it in the question or chat box, and then we'll unmute the call and we'll take your questions now.
Don't be shy.
Oh, okay. We have a question here about a deposit. What is a typical good faith deposit amount? Well, that is predicated on the price. It's a percentage typically. If the price is $700,000, the minimum deposit is usually 1% of the purchase price. It's better to come in with a 3% initial deposit, which would be $21,000, but that's the minimum and typical maximums that we see for good faith deposits.
And that doesn't leave the escrow account. That stays with the neutral third party.
Right. Next question. Okay. Well, I think we have
You've done a good job. Didn't get any questions.
So, yeah, that's great.
Answer every question.
Well, you know how to reach us, and thanks for attending today, and we look forward to helping you with your needs in real estate and financing, and make it a great day.
Ciao.